Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a total of 12 important articles. See, many students assume that the Sunday newspaper is not relevant for the exam and they often tend to skip the newspaper. But I always insist that don't miss the Sunday newspaper because there are many important and interesting articles which are extremely relevant for our exams. So for prelims and mains, we have 7 important articles that require a detailed analysis and few small articles that are exclusively relevant only for the prelims examination. So stay with me for the next 1 hour 15 minutes so that I can comprehensively cover all these topics and essentially you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes and comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And also do join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code or by clicking on the link provided in the video description. Because after the session ends, we provide a daily quiz on these topics. Based on what we have covered in the Hindu analysis, we provide you practice MCQs, which will help you prepare for the upcoming prelims exam. So with this, let's get started by looking at the first article where we have an important column on page number 14. This article written by Stanley Johnny talks about the Riyadh summit that was recently hosted by Saudi Arabia. In the context of the ongoing war in West Asia, the Gaza war and the Israel war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. In the context of this conflict, Saudi Arabia organized a conference of all the Arab Islamic nations which have a common stake, a common interest in this conflict. And the outcome of the Riyadh summit is something that needs to be understood and analyzed. The question being raised by the author is whether the Riyadh summit, will it have any impact on the Gaza conflict and how can it redefine the geopolitics of West Asia? So let's dive a little deep into this topic and understand what was the Riyadh summit all about? Who were the participants? And in what context is Saudi Arabia leading this initiative? And how will the Gaza war affect West Asian geopolitics and how the Arab Islamic states can influence the Gaza war and what could be the eventual outcome? So that is what we need to understand and analyze based on this article. So first, let's look at the outcome of Riyadh summit. As I told you, it was organized by Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is one of the most powerful and influential West Asian powers. It's a Sunni country seen as a leader of the Sunni world and largely a leader of the Muslim world as well, and a very strong, powerful voice as far as West Asian geopolitics is concerned. So under the leadership of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's also popularly known as MBS, Saudi Arabia brought together almost all the Arab Islamic nations from the Middle East, North Africa region, and they jointly condemned the actions of Israel since last October. As you all know, on October 7, 2023, the Palestinian extremist outfit based out of Gaza, that is Hamas, carried out a brutal terror attack against Israel, following which Israel went to war in Gaza, even in West Bank. And here Israel stands accused of committing war crimes, a genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians. So probably for the first time since the war began, the Arab Muslim world has come together collectively through the Riyadh summit and they have jointly condemned Israel's disproportionate use of force, which has led to large-scale human rights violations in Gaza. These countries have criticized the escalation carried out by Israel as well with regard to the war it has triggered in southern Lebanon by targeting another extremist outfit called Hezbollah. So this is probably the first time since the war began that Saudi Arabia has been publicly critical of Israel. Saudi Arabia has aligned other Arab states and jointly they have condemned Israel and they have expressed support for Palestine. So during the Riyadh summit, these countries have sworn and they have committed that West Asia will never be peaceful if the Palestinian issue is not addressed. They have again brought up the centrality of the Palestine issue to resolving the instability in West Asia. They have reaffirmed their commitment to the Arab Peace Initiative that was declared in 2002. In 2002, the Arab countries, along with Israel, came out with a peace initiative through which Arab countries agreed to recognize Israel and normalize relations with Israel if Israel would accept the two-state solution and provide for the creation of an independent sovereign state of Palestine. So this arrangement that was brought out in 2002 was a major peace initiative which probably could have stabilized the West Asia region. But now, given the circumstances surrounding the ongoing conflict, this statement coming out of the Riyadh summit under the leadership of Saudi Arabia is very, very significant. It not only highlights the centrality of the Palestinian question for stability in West Asia, it also indicates the changing dynamics in West Asia. So let's dive a little deeper into this topic and understand this in complete detail. See, before October 7, 2023, West Asia was actually headed towards normalcy. The Israel-Palestine issue dates back all the way to 1947-48, when the two-state plan was proposed by the UN to resolve the Israel-Palestine question. In 1948, Israel had unilaterally declared independence, thus violating the two-state plan. And since then, Israel has even snatched away large part of the Palestinian territory. And today, most of the Palestinian territory is under the military occupation of Israel, and it is recognized internationally as well that Palestinian territories are under the illegal occupation of Israel. Ever since this Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, the Arab states went to war against Israel. Initially, the neighboring countries, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, with the support of other Arab nations, they fought against Israel in 1948 to help liberate Palestine. This is what we refer to as the First Israel-Arab War. In 1967, the Six-Day War broke out again over the same issue. During the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel even managed to capture territory from the Arab states. From Egypt, Israel would capture the Sinai Peninsula or the Sinai Desert. And from Syria, Israel would capture the Golan Heights. So Israel went on to strengthen its position, occupy more territory in the region, while the Arab states continued their hostile approach towards Israel. But post-1970s, we have seen a shift happening in West Asian geopolitics. In 1973, Egypt and Syria, they made one more attempt to retake the captured areas, that is Sinai and Golan respectively, by launching the surprise Yom Kippur War. Probably this was the last time that the Arab states were in direct conflict with Israel, because after that, by mid-late 1970s, the dynamics would change in the region and in global geopolitics as well, which would realign the alliances in the region and the hostility of the Arab states towards Israel. So until 1970s, most of the Arab countries were openly hostile to Israel. Even the other Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, would back the neighbors like Egypt, Jordan, Syria, etc., and fund and arm them in their war efforts against Israel. None of the Arab countries recognized Israel until the 1970s. None of them established diplomatic relations. There was no normalcy between Arab states and Israel. So this conflict between Arab states and Israel and the hostile relations was centered on the Palestinian issue. But post 1970s, we have seen some changes happening, and that is what you need to understand. Egypt would become the first Arab country in 1979 to recognize Israel and set up normal relations with Israel. This was possible because Egypt was desperate to get back its territory, that is the Sinai Desert or the Sinai Peninsula that you can see over here in the map. This would be Egypt, and this right over here, this triangular shaped peninsula that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea is the Sinai Peninsula, the Sinai Desert. This is where the strategic Suez Canal is also located, which is so crucial to Egypt. So in 1979, Egypt would strike this peace agreement known as the Camp David Peace Accord that was negotiated by the United States. The US, which has been an Israeli ally right from the beginning, would assist Israel to normalize relations with Egypt because for nearly 3 decades, Egypt and Israel were at war. Egypt would even play a big role in backing the Palestinian armed movements against Israel. So Egypt would become the first Arab country to normalize relations with Israel and set up diplomatic ties through the Camp David Accord. And in return, Egypt got control over the Sinai. Then Jordan would become the second Arab country in 1994 to recognize Israel and establish ties with Israel. This came after the Oslo Accords of 1993. Through the Oslo Accords, Israel recognized the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which until then was treated as an extremist terrorist organization. It was recognized as the Palestinian National Authority to administer the Palestinian territory. Israel committed to eventually provide for autonomy and self-rule for Palestinian territories in return for the end of Palestinian terrorism and insurgency. So following the Oslo Accords of 1993, Jordan would become the second Arab state in 1994 to recognize Israel and set up normal ties with Israel. Then came the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, where all the Arab states committed that they're willing to work with Israel, normalize relations with Israel, if Israel grants independence to Palestine and provides for the liberation of Palestine. So what I'm trying to say is that post 1979, the Arab states, particularly the Sunni powers aligned with Saudi Arabia, they were not hostile to Israel. In fact, the dynamics started changing because within the Islamic world, there was a major split that occurred in geopolitics based on sectarian lines, where the Sunni and Shia powers developed intense rivalries between them. Because in 1979, Iran, which went through a revolution led by the radical Shia clerics, would become a Shia conservative state under the Ayatollah. Until 1979, Iran was aligned with United States. The then Shah of Iran was a close ally of the US. So by 1970s, the US had managed to stitch a close alliance amongst the Arab states, and it was working towards normalization of ties between the Arab states and Israel, especially after the 1973 oil crisis. The US and Saudi, the top oil producer, they started aligning together, working together, and in many ways, Saudi and Israel had established a secret partnership. Because by 1979, Iran had emerged as a Shia power under a radical conservative regime, which was seen as a threat by the Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia. So a new axis was forming in this region, where US, Israel were bringing some of the Arab states on their side, particularly the Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the others. And this was paving the way for normalization with countries like Egypt, Jordan, and the others. Whereas Iran would now become enemy number one for Israel and United States. And since Iran, being a Shia power, was seen as a rival by the Sunni powers, it was natural for this split to occur. But In the Arab Peace Initiative, all the Arab states here had committed to normalize the relations with Israel, provided if Israel ensured that Palestine was established as an independent sovereign state, which of course never happened. Now, what you need to understand is that in 2020, there was a resumption of the normalization process under then US President Donald Trump. Trump initiated a new peace initiative, which came to be known as the Abraham Accords. Under the Abraham Accords, mediated by United States, UAE and Bahrain, they became the third and fourth Arab country to recognize Israel and establish normal relations with Israel. In fact, if you go back to the map, you can clearly see the Arab states which have formally established ties with Israel, apart from Egypt and Jordan, as we discussed. UAE and Bahrain would sign the Abraham Accords in 2020, and they normalized the relations with Israel. This was followed by Sudan and Morocco from the North Africa region. So this was part of the normalization effort. And last year, there was a bigger development. In September 2023, just 1 month before the terror attack by Hamas, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, made a big announcement. He announced that even Saudi Arabia is considering the normalization of ties with Israel, and that the two countries were at an advanced stage of normalizing the relations. So if this recognition had come through, if Saudi Arabia were to recognize Israel and set up normal diplomatic ties, then essentially the Palestinian cause would have been weakened. So many experts view this series of developments as one of the causes which could have triggered Hamas to carry out the deadly attack in October 2023. So what happened on October 7th was not a coincidence. The developments happening in the region where US was driving the Arab states to get closer to Israel was weakening the Palestinian movement, and the West Asia region and the powerful monarchs over here were losing focus on the Palestinian issue. They were looking to protect their own economic and strategic interests by working with US and Israel, because they all saw Iran as their common enemy. And last year, MBS had announced that Saudi Arabia is working out a normalization deal, and they were likely to sign an agreement similar to Abraham Accords, which could have established ties between Saudi and Israel. And this would have been transformative in the region. So this is what probably triggered Hamas. The overall normalization that was happening here. UAE, Bahrain had recognized Israel, Sudan and Morocco. Plus at G20, the IMEC corridor was proposed, which would involve India and West Asian powers like Saudi Arabia, UAE and Israel to link with Europe and establish a transport corridor, which was backed by the United States. So this overall normalization would have brought stability to the region, but it would end up sidelining the Palestinian question. Because unlike the previous normalization agreements, Abraham Accords of 2020 did not provide any benefits to Palestinians. For example, if you look at the Israel-Egypt peace agreement, the Camp David Accord, even in that agreement, Israel had committed that eventually it will pave the way for an independent Palestine. Even in the 94 agreement with Jordan, Israel had committed that eventually it would pave the way for creating an independent state of Palestine. In the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, Israel again committed with Arab states that it would honor the two-state commitment it had made earlier in 1947. But however, the 2020 Abraham Accords made no mention of Palestinians. It was purely a peace agreement between UAE, Bahrain and Israel, which was mediated by United States, which was later followed up by similar agreements with Sudan and Morocco. So now if Saudi Arabia were to sign a similar agreement, that would have changed the entire geopolitical landscape. Because last year, prior to this, the Sunni and Shia powers had normalized their relations as well. Through the mediation of China, Iran and Saudi Arabia had achieved a detente. At the start of 2023, the Sunni Shia powers were normalizing their relations. Iran and Saudi Arabia re-established their diplomatic ties after years of hostility and rivalry. So if this were to be followed by a peace agreement with Saudi and Israel, that would have stabilize the region, but Palestinian issue would have been completely sidelined and ignored. So probably this is what triggered Hamas to carry out this deadly attack, which eventually led to the war. So what I'm trying to say is that most of the Arab powers were making their peace with Israel, even at the cost of ignoring the Palestinian issue, which they had backed and supported from such a long time. But now things are starting to change. We are seeing a reversal of decades of normalization because the alleged use of force by Israel in Gaza, in West Bank, in Lebanon has led to large-scale civilian casualties. Close to 45,000 civilians have been killed across these conflict zones from Gaza to Lebanon. And Israel stands accused of committing a genocide, ethnic cleansing against Palestinians. So, on the street in Arab countries, there is public anger growing against Israel, against United States. The popular sentiment across the Islamic countries in North Africa, Middle East region is against Israel and against United States and in favor of Palestine. Now, these monarchs, they cannot ignore the public sentiment because groups like Hamas, Hezbollah are growing in popularity. Since they have committed to radical religion and used fundamentalist ideas to target Israel, it has gained popularity on the street in Arab countries, and this is seen as a threat by the conservative monarchies. For example, the sheikhs across the region, from Saudi Arabia to UAE to Bahrain, they see the rise of radical groups like Hamas and Hezbollah as a threat to their own identity and their own control over power. So they can't afford any further space to be ceded to radical outfits like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the others. So that is probably the reason why the Arab states are reviewing their normalization. In fact, UAE, which had re-established ties with Israel, has gone on to criticize Israel and cut down relations back with Israel because of the popular sentiment, which has swung in favor of Palestinians. And on the streets in Arab countries, the sentiment is strongly against Israel and United States. So these countries can no longer ignore that. At one point, Israel was even hoping that it could form a collective defense against Iran by bringing US and Arab Sunni powers together so that they could jointly counter a hostile Iran. US working with Sunni powers like Saudi Arabia and UAE with Israel collectively to counter Iran and its allies. This is what Israel and US were hoping for. But last year's attack by Hamas and the Gaza war has changed the equation completely. Now the Sunni powers can no longer tolerate Israel's alleged atrocities because this could increase public resentment and threaten the monarchies in the Sunni countries. So this is what explains the Riyadh summit. There's no other reason why Mohammed bin Salman would call for a summit of all the Arab Islamic countries and openly criticize Israel after a long time. For many years, Saudi Arabia was having a secret peace with Israel. They were steps away from establishing a formal peace agreement. So there was no other reason why Saudi Arabia would go on to publicly criticize Israel and take a stand on the Palestinian issue again, because it's trying to curtail the public resentment. On the street, there is pro-Palestinian sentiment, anti-Israel, anti-US sentiment. And these monarchs across the Arab world, they understand that sentiment, so they are publicly expressing support for Palestine again. And this brings us back to my initial opening statement that West Asia can never be stable unless and until the root issue, which is the Israel-Palestine issue, is resolved. And the Arab states strongly believe that it can be resolved only with the two-state solution. This is exactly India's position as well. India has long believed that West Asia can become normal, the region can become stable again, only if the Palestinian question is addressed, which means there should be an independent sovereign Palestine living side by side with Israel. This was the UN plan of 1947. So most countries, including India, the Arab states, and many others from the global south, they support the two-state plan, and it reiterates the point that West Asia can never be stable unless and until the Palestinian question is addressed and resolved. So that is what we take away from the Riyadh summit. And this helps you understand what could be the impact of the Riyadh summit on the geopolitics of West Asia. So this brings pressure back on Israel and US, because now Sunni powers are also taking a stand. For almost 40 years, Sunni powers had stood with US and Israel, if not publicly, at least secretly. But since the Gaza war and alleged Israeli atrocities, they are no longer able to take this position. And now it appears that all Arab Islamic countries are uniting again to support Palestine and to take a stand against Israel. So that is the likely impact of the Riyadh summit. So please take up this practice question. There can be a possible question related to the Riyadh summit and the Palestinian question. Resolving the Palestine question is key to peace in West Asia. So that is a statement which has been given. So examine the statement in the context of the recent Riyadh summit. So please write an answer to this question by using the points that I have explained. And let's see how many of you can write a good answer. And please post your answers in the comments so it can help other students as well. Now let's move on to the next article. On page 13, we have an article related to India's healthcare system. Recently, a study was conducted which has highlighted the safety risk faced by our doctors and healthcare workers in our healthcare system. Some of you might be wondering, how come doctors and healthcare workers face a safety risk at work? So let's understand this article in slight detail. According to this recent study, which was carried out by the Indian Medical Association along with few other institutions, they have pointed out through this survey that majority of the doctors in India, they are worried about experiencing workplace violence, meaning there is a possibility that they could be targeted. They could be beaten up, stabbed, or even killed because of the violence that is often shown by the relatives of the patients. Recently, there was a horrific incident in Tamil Nadu. Just a few days ago in Tamil Nadu, a doctor on duty was stabbed to death by one of the relatives of the patient. Many such incidents keep happening across the country. Now, who doesn't remember the horrific rape at RG Kar Medical Institute in Kolkata and many such similar cases across the country? In fact, doctors and workers in the healthcare industry have often raised their voice and protested as well regarding the lack of safety and the frequent violent attacks against them. So what we need to understand is, why are these attacks happening? Why is there a safety risk? Why is workplace violence so common in hospitals? What are the root causes, the systemic issues which are leading to these challenges, and how can it be addressed? That is what we need to understand. According to this survey, which is based on data from 2017 and a recent study conducted in Kerala, 75% of doctors across India have said that they have experienced some sort of workplace violence. Either they have faced verbal abuse from patients and their relatives and friends, or sometimes they have been physically attacked. Now, the risk factor for women doctors increases even more, especially when they are posted with regard to nighttime duty. Those who work the night shift, right? The women doctors face a bigger risk due to the lack of facilities and the increased risk because of the violence which is often seen at hospitals and at healthcare facilities across the country. Now, the point is, why are such incidents happening? The study has pointed out that there are several systemic problems in the healthcare system of India which is contributing to such incidents of workplace violence. The study conducted in Kerala, which was specific to the state of Kerala, more than 3,800 doctors have reported significant gaps in safety measures. That just highlights the gravity of the problem. 11% of the surveyed doctors have said they feel very unsafe at their workplace. 24% of them have expressed that in general they feel unsafe while working in their workplace. Now, this is not just limited to few states or few districts or only to rural areas. This is a country-wide phenomena. There have been incidents even in cities like Delhi or Hyderabad where doctors have been attacked by patients and their relatives. not just verbally, but physically, causing grievous injuries, sometimes even death. So many such incidents keep recurring, and that is what leads doctors and the healthcare workers to step up and protest and raise their voice against how helpless they have become. So let's look at the root causes here. What is causing such violent incidents? What could be the solution to that problem? The study has identified deep-rooted systemic problems in the healthcare system of India. For example, India's healthcare system is overburdened and overcrowded. If you look at our hospitals, even the multi-speciality private hospitals in cities to remote rural hospitals in the hinterlands of the country, most healthcare facilities are overburdened, overcrowded. They don't have the right infrastructure. They don't have enough number of doctors. They don't have enough healthcare workers. So this leads the patients to sometimes perceive that they're not getting the right amount of care. They're not getting the right amount of attention from the healthcare system. In some cases, it is genuine as well. Since doctors are overburdened, sometimes senior doctors, they delegate the work to junior doctors with less experience. Many of you might have faced this as well when you visit a healthcare facility, where you start feeling a little insecure about being treated on a serious condition from a junior, less experienced doctor, right? Especially the duty staff, right? Who do the rounds of the wards, who ensure that the drug regimen is administered on time, who keep a regular check on the patients after the surgeries are done. Usually they are junior staff without enough experience, and upon that they are overburdened. So this leads to lack of attention, mistakes being made as well, negligence being shown. For example, recently in Gurgaon, there was an incident where a doctor has operated on a young boy on the wrong eye, which is a pure case of medical negligence. So in some cases, it is perceived negligence where patients feel that they're getting very limited care and treatment. They feel that they're getting neglected by the doctors. But sometimes it is genuine. There is genuine a case of medical negligence as well occurring. So there are deep-rooted problems which need a careful observation, and it requires a well thought out solution. For example, doctors don't know the basic soft skills, communication skills sometimes when they have to communicate the difficult news. Let's say they are handling terminally ill patients or grievously injured patients, or a patient might pass away on the operation table. Now, when they have to communicate the news, if there is a lapse by the healthcare management, the senior management of the hospital, if they don't show the empathy and convey the news appropriately to the grieving family members, this might trigger an emotional response from the relatives of the patient as well. There are also cases where doctors are heckled. Doctors are not allowed to perform their work. For example, when accidents occur and patients are rushed in, usually a crowd assembles, very eager to shoot everything on their mobile phone, and they disrupt the work of the doctors, even threatening the professionalism and the standard protocols that need to be followed by the doctors. So doctors find it very difficult to deal with the crowds, the mobs that assemble, and they find it very difficult to keep the relatives and the well-wishers out of the sensitive areas in the hospital, from ICUs to the operation theatre to the wards. So they're not able to enforce the guidelines, the protocols, and patients feel that they don't have enough avenues to raise complaints about the poor quality of healthcare that they are receiving. They don't have enough ways of getting justice if there is a case of medical negligence. This could also be a reason why patients and their relatives are often provoked and they take matters into their own hands to seek justice by beating up the hospital staff, including the doctors. So there are problems present on both the sides. It's not a one-sided story. And these problems, be it the problems created by the patients, their relatives, or the problems on the side of the healthcare industry, they are all deep-rooted systemic problems which requires careful attention from the government to be resolved. Is that clear? The study has clearly established that overcrowding of facilities, the inability of the hospital management to manage the crowds, right? Their inability to enforce the protocols, the lack of cooperation they get from the relatives of the patient, and how easily people disregard the norms in a hospital. They are mainly contributing to these cases and incidents. And especially if you look at those doctors and staff who are on night duty, they don't even have basic facilities, which exposes them to greater risk. For example, in many hospitals, the study has shown that the duty rooms where doctors can rest is located very far away from the wards. Sometimes women doctors, they have to walk in dark corridors late in the night to even reach their wardrobe or duty rooms to take rest, or sometimes there are no adequate restrooms and toilets available. Sometimes those on night shift, they don't even have adequate sleeping arrangements. They end up sleeping in the ward beds itself, exposing them to any possible attack by the patients or by their relatives. So there are many such problematic issues present within the healthcare system. The lack of facilities for those on night shift, the inability to enforce crowd management, the repeated pressure exerted by the relatives of the patients, right? Patients expect miracles from doctors, right? But that may not be possible. So whenever the treatment goes out of hand, or if the cost increases, sometimes the doctors may not be able to communicate the exact estimate cost, or let's say due to a complication, the cost of treatment shoots up, and when they communicate this news, the relatives who are not able to pay up, right, they might emotionally burst out and retaliate against the doctors. Even those cases have occurred. So there are multiple issues that need addressing. But primarily, the writer of this article points out that crowd control and triage management is critical in the healthcare industry. The strict guidelines on visitor policy has to be enforced, which means there should be adequate security staff in the hospitals to manage the groups, to manage the crowd that might assemble, be it at emergency wards or be it at regular wards. There should be adequate staff on duty, security staff, who can ensure that there is crowd control. The patients, relatives, and the bystanders are managed, and they are prevented from accessing the sensitive areas in a hospital. Triaging is also very crucial, where the hospital management will grade the patients according to the severity of the case and their chances of survival, and treat them accordingly in different facilities. This ensures that the patients are taken into the right center of treatment, whether they require ICU support or whether they require immediate surgery. So triaging will help in segregating the patients, prioritizing the patients who need utmost attention, and along with that, adequate security measures, physical security measures, by increasing the security staff, by enforcing the basic norms in hospitals. This can go a long way in minimizing the chances of patient-doctor conflict. See, for example, the government of Kerala brought out a law in 2012 to protect doctors. It's called the Hospital Protection Law, which was amended in 2023 as well. See, even if governments bring out new laws, there's no guarantee that it will solve the systemic problems. See, India has enough laws in place. We have enough regulations, guidelines. The problem is lack of enforcement. So, from this article, we can understand that legislation alone will not solve the problem. There are sufficient laws and guidelines in place. What we need is effective enforcement. The Indian Medical Association has even started a soft skill program for doctors to train them in their communication skills so that there is no miscommunication from the hospital management and doctors to the patients, especially when they are conveying the difficult news. If the patient has passed away, or if the expenses have shot up, or if the patient requires advanced treatment and surgeries where the cost could shoot up. While communicating this news to the relatives of the patient, doctors and the hospital management should ensure they're using the right communication skills. They should have better emotional intelligence. And for that, they require soft skill training, which is being now provided by the Indian Medical Association. So these measures are necessary to address the root problems. Dealing with the overcrowded hospitals is the first step which is necessary, and there should be adequate security staff present to enforce the existing norms and guidelines. Improving the soft skills of doctors and hospital management is another step. And finally, ensuring that violators are punished strictly. Those who target doctors and hospital staff, they should be punished according to the law. There should be quick investigation, quick arrest, and quick justice has to be delivered so that it can set an example. At the same time, if there is a case of medical negligence, let's say doctors are negligent and they have committed a blunder, even in that case, there should be grievance redressal where the patients can seek justice and ensure that they are compensated by that hospital, and the doctor is also held accountable for the negligence. So this system has to be built in the healthcare industry. Of course, the norms are present, the guidelines are present, the laws are present. What we need is effective enforcement. Those on night duty need better facilities, especially women doctors who are posted on night shift. They need not only better security, but better facilities as well to rest and to take care of themselves, to ensure that they can work and function in a safe environment. So these measures have to be ensured by the government and as well as by the healthcare industry. So let's see what kind of question can be asked over here. Violence against doctors and healthcare workers flourishes because there are deep-rooted systemic problems which have been left unaddressed in India's healthcare system. Discuss. So let's see if you can write an answer to this question based on what we have studied. Now let's move on to the next article. On page 11, we have an article related to diabetes and how India has become the diabetes capital of the world. There was a recent study conducted by a group of researchers with the help of World Health Organization. And this research paper on the distribution of diabetes around the world was published in the popular scientific journal, the Lancet. So according to this research paper, around the world, there are more than 800 million diabetes patients, which is a staggering number. And what is shocking for India is that, according to the WHO report, nearly a quarter of these diabetic patients, that is 25% of the global diabetic population, is present in our country, in India. This is what makes India the diabetes capital of the world, which means that there is a significant health risk on the Indian economy. So let's understand what this article is bringing out. So according to this study, which was backed by World Health Organization, there are a total of 828 million diabetes patients. That includes both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. I'll explain very soon what is type 1 and type 2 diabetes. I'll come to that point. But first, let's look at the findings of this study. So around the world, there are 828 million diabetes patients with 212 million patients concentrated in India. Essentially, a quarter, that is almost 25% of the global diabetes burden is on India. This is followed by China. China has around 148 million diabetes patients, but India comes out at the top. Now, what do you mean by type 1, type 2 diabetes and why diabetes is such a big health risk? See, type 1 diabetes is largely a result of a genetic disorder. So, type 1 diabetes cannot be prevented, cannot be cured, right? A lot of people suffer from type 1 diabetes. The cause is believed to be a genetic abnormality, which leads to lack of insulin production. And as a result, results in high blood glucose levels. Whereas type 2 diabetes, which is an emergent non-communicable disease over the last few decades, this is largely a result of the poor lifestyle in a globalized modern world. The poor diet that we all consume, which is very high in sugar content, in its glycemic index, which leads to the sudden spikes of your blood glucose level. This could eventually cripple the ability of your body to produce sufficient insulin or develop insulin resistance. The lack of physical activity as well is a major contributor. The lack of exercise, the sedentary lifestyle, along with our consumption of processed food, junk food, which is very high in sugar, right? This is what leads to type 2 diabetes, which is more of a lifestyle related disorder. So this condition is type 2 diabetes, but either of the conditions are absolutely deadly. Both have a crippling effect. Whether it's type 1 or type 2 diabetes, both have a crippling effect on the long-term health of the patient because they could lead to multiple complications. They affect almost every single physiological function. It could lead to deterioration of your skin. It could affect the functioning of critical organs. It could affect the hormonal balance. It could affect the ability of your body to heal. It could make the patient more susceptible, vulnerable to various infections. And diabetes patients often find it difficult to recover from serious infections. For example, you might know that during COVID-19, diabetes patients were seen as part of the vulnerable category, right? Because these are pre-existing comorbidities which can add to complications in case of other conditions as well. It could increase cardiovascular risk. It could affect the functioning of the kidney and other key internal organs. And eventually the lifespan can come down drastically for patients suffering from diabetes. Studies by WHO holds diabetes directly responsible for millions of deaths, premature deaths that are occurring. And India shares the highest burden. So the poor lifestyle has a lot to do with the surge in diabetes cases in India. That is the trend around the world. As economies have boomed, as globalized multinational culture has become a part of daily life, it has led to a more sedentary lifestyle with very limited mobility and exercise. Also, large-scale urbanization, limited space available for walking, jogging, exercise also has a role to play. Plus, the poor diet, which is high in processed food, sugars, junk food, which leads to obesity. So these are the clear risk factors, and that is what the report is highlighting. See, the study conducted within India by the Indian Council of Medical Research, it puts the number of diabetes patients at just around 50% of this number. This WHO-backed study says there are 212 million diabetes patients in India. But the official numbers from India is somewhere around 105 million, almost half of it. Now, this discrepancy is because of the different indicators and parameters which are used. The global study considers the HbAC test as the norm. The HbAC1 test provides an average of your blood glucose spikes over a 3-month period. This is seen as a better indicator by several countries, by the healthcare systems around the world. But generally, doctors consider your fasting blood glucose and the postprandial glucose level to be a more accurate indicator. So this difference in considering the threshold levels and the test which involves different metrics, this is largely responsible for the stark difference in numbers that you see. According to official numbers in India, the diabetes patients are just somewhere above 100 million in number. But according to the WHO-backed study, it's almost double that number. The difference is because of the different parameters used. But either ways, the number doesn't matter. Either ways, India will still be dealing with a very large burden of diabetes cases. So it is a clear sign for the government to wake up and tackle diabetes on a war footing. Almost how we tackle epidemics, pandemics. On a similar scale, you need to tackle the silent epidemic as well. Because this significantly increases cardiovascular risk, reduces lifespan, leads to severe healthcare complications. So one way out is to encourage healthy, nutritious food, discourage processed junk food, tackle obesity, promote a more active lifestyle, encourage people to exercise, create incentives for the people to exercise and lead an active life, and provide facilities for that. Now today in India, I don't think there is a city or a town or a village where you can conveniently step out and exercise and work out when compared to, let's say, Western developed countries. Unless you live in good gated communities and societies, it's almost impossible to step out on the street to walk or to exercise, right? Only the rich maybe or middle class, right? They may be able to afford gyms and other facilities, but the lower sections of the society, they are largely deprived from these health facilities. This is what the study points out as well. The WHO-backed study points out the income gap, the social gap that is being seen when it comes to diabetes treatment. Richer countries are doing better. They are detecting diabetes cases and treating the patients as well. But low income, middle income countries are struggling. And within a country, again, the slightly well-off population does much better than the relatively poorer population. So this divide that you see is something that needs to be addressed, which means the government has to play a proactive role to provide a proactive assistance to the weaker sections, not only in detecting diabetes at an early stage, but also in helping them battling the condition to maintain a normal lifestyle and to bring back a sense of normalcy. So that is what we take away from this important article. Now let's look at another article from page 11 related to prison reforms. Recently, a body associated with the Supreme Court of India has brought out a report on the problem of overcrowding of Indian prisons. This research was conducted by Center for Research and Planning, which is associated with the Supreme Court of India, and in a study sanctioned by the Supreme Court, the Center for Research and Planning has studied the state of Indian prisons, the overcrowded nature of Indian prisons, and has suggested few solutions to reduce the overcrowding problem. So let's quickly understand the key takeaways from this article. According to this report, the capacity of Indian prisons cumulatively across the country is around 4,36,000. That is the total capacity of Indian prisons. Those are the number of inmates that can be held. Now please understand, in prison, it's not just the convicts who are held, but even under trials. Those who are under detention are also held in prisons. So it's not just convicted criminals whose guilt has been established in a court who are serving their sentence, but even those who are under detention, under detentive laws, and those who are under trial, going through the trial process, those who are still accused, even they are lodged in prisons. Now, prison management, it essentially comes under the state governments. It's a state subject. States are primarily responsible for it. Apologies for the technical glitch. Don't worry, we noticed the glitch as soon as it occurred and I stopped my discussion as well. So let me resume the discussion from where we stopped. We were discussing the overcrowding of Indian prisons, according to a study conducted by a body associated with the Supreme Court of India. This study has pointed out that the prison capacity is around 4,36,000 in India, but there are 5,73,000 prisoners lodged in Indian jails, which means they are overcrowded. They are holding prisoners way beyond their capacity, and the occupancy rate is 131%. So this shows the problem of overcrowding of prisons. Now, why is it occurring? Why are Indian prisons overcrowded? The study further shows that majority of the prisoners held in jails are under trials. 76% of prisoners in India are still under trials, meaning their guilt has still not been proven. They are still accused, going through trials in their respective cases. Only 23% of the prisoners in jail are convicted criminals, and the rest 1% are the detainees. So this shows the problem of overcrowding of our prisons is a result of the under trial population, which is massively high. Now, the police in the country generally have a tendency to lodge under trials in jail, keep them in jail for years together. In many cases, the under trials would have spent more time in jail than the actual sentence that they might eventually get if they are convicted. So many times the under trial prison term itself ends up becoming a punishment even before their guilt was proven in the court. So this is also a miscarriage of justice. So that is why the Supreme Court and the research body which brought out this study, they are advocating the use of technology to ensure that some of the under trials can be released from prison. Now, some of you might argue, sir, doesn't this pose a risk? But please understand, these are still under trials whose guilt has not been proven. And especially in lakhs of cases involving petty crimes and minor offenses, the criminals can be released from jail as the trial continues in the court. And meanwhile, there are technological interventions available to keep a check and to keep tracking the under trials. That is the norm, in fact, in many countries. In countries like United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, in fact, across Europe, even in Malaysia, they use electronic tracking systems. They basically tag the under trial. They send them back home as the case continues in court. They have to put on an anklet or a bracelet which cannot be removed at any cost, and they are geo-tagged or geo-fenced. So if they leave the boundary, a set boundary of their home, or their neighborhood, immediately triggers will go off and the authorities will rush to detain that convict. To detain the under trial. So such electronic tracking systems are helping several foreign countries to reduce the overcrowding in their prisons and keep under trials out of prison as much as possible. Also, it's a good incentive system for the prisoners to behave well, because usually this parole is based on good behavior. So those prisoners who are showing a willingness to reform and those who are showing good behavior will have a good incentive. If there is an electronic tracking system, they need not be kept in prisons. They could be given this leeway where under trials could be let out, especially those accused of minor crimes, petty offenses, etc. They can be allowed to step out and they need not be jailed, which is overcrowding the prisons, leading to serious challenges in prison management. But however, there are risk factors as well, which has been highlighted with the Supreme Court. Even though electronic tracking will help in easing the overcrowding of prisons, it will reduce the mental stress of prisoners as well. Don't forget, under trials go through a lot of mental stress due to long periods of isolation from their family. Right? Yes, convicts deserve the punishment, but not under trials until their guilt is proven in the court. So electronic tracking can help in taking care of the humanitarian needs of the under trials, reduce the overall cost of prison management for the state governments, which are primarily responsible for prison management. But however, there are risk factors. What if the electronic tracking system is misused? What if it leads to constant surveillance? Right? This could lead to violation of civil liberties, including right to privacy. Even prisoners have a right to privacy and they do enjoy certain fundamental rights. So constant electronic tracking, the nature of surveillance maintained by the authorities, by the law enforcement, and possible misuse, and how will accountability be ensured? This is a risk factor. That is what the Supreme Court has highlighted. Now, this is where you need to note that last year, Ministry of Home Affairs has taken a very important step. The MHA has issued a model law for prison management, and under this new model law for prison management, the MHA has recommended the introduction of electronic tracking so that under trial prisoners can be let off, which can reduce the burden on our prisons, reduce the cost of prison management, and also take care of the humanitarian needs of under trial prisoners. So there is a policy that the central government has drafted, and it has suggested the states to adopt, because eventually states have to decide, because prison management is a state subject. So this is what we take away from this important article. Next, on the front page, the Minister for Information Broadcasting, Ashwini Vaishnav, has spoken about digital media, how the rise of digital media has threatened conventional media, and what challenges have arisen due to the widespread adoption of digital media. So I think it's a very important observation. So let's take a quick look at the points raised by the Union Minister. The Union Minister has drawn a comparison between traditional media, or what we call as conventional media, which includes newspapers, television, radio, etc. And he compares it with new media, the digital media, that includes your social media platforms, OTT platforms, digital media outlets, etc. See, when you look at traditional media, the conventional media outlets, they often provided for one-to-many communication. Like, for example, there is one newspaper publishing newspaper, which is read by, let's say, thousands or lakhs of subscribers. Or one TV channel broadcasting news and entertainment, which is consumed by maybe few millions of people. So that is one-to-many communication. Primarily, conventional media was always news-based. Entertainment, recreation came later. And usually in conventional media, communication was always one-way communication, where the publisher or broadcaster would be communicating with their audience. And usually the audience doesn't necessarily get a way to express their views and opinions. This was a limitation as well of conventional media. But one good thing about conventional media was not everyone could establish a newspaper or a radio channel or a TV channel, because it was expensive. You need to hire journalists, maintain a large staff, collect information from around the world, process, check the facts, and then publish the content. So this was good in many ways, because fact checking was much better. There was more responsibility, more accountability. There was a slight lag in the relaying of information as well, which would help in curbing emotional reactions when sensitive events were being reported. At the same time, the ethics code on the media, be it newspaper journalists or electronic TV journalists, in general, they would exercise more caution about what they were reporting. They might all have their ideological bias, but eventually they would at least do a basic fact check, which was traditionally seen as good, because fake news and the misuse of media was largely constricted. I'm not saying it was not possible. Even newspaper, TV, radio can be misused to spread fake news, propaganda, etc. But it was largely restricted and limited. Not everybody could create content. Not everybody could publish news. Very few reputed organizations could thrive in the business. They would be expected to uphold highest journalistic standards, and they would do a basic fact check. And more importantly, their reach was always limited. But now compare this with digital media. Compare this with the new age media which has come up. The reach is staggering. It's almost unlimited reach. On social media, your content can go viral, and almost every individual with a smartphone and basic internet becomes a content creator. So here it's many-to-many communication. It's not just government agencies, media outlets. Every individual on the street could become a potential content creator, a news creator. It does provide for two-way interaction. It does make news more democratic. But if you think about it, this is what enables the spread of fake news, misinformation, disinformation, which could be a big threat to democracy itself, to society, to the security of the state. There is great potential on social media, for example, to misuse the platform to spread fake news and propaganda, to promote radicalism and extremism, to create disaffection against the state, to instigate riots and mobs and rebellions, or even to manipulate elections. So that is exactly the risks being highlighted by the Union Minister as well. There are 4 specific challenges that Ashwini Vaishnav has highlighted, and I would like to point them out one by one. Point number 1 raised by the Union Minister is about the sharing of revenue between conventional media and new age media. Now you tell me, where do you read most of your news? I'm sure many of you may not be subscribing to newspapers or logging on to websites, right? Even if you have access to it, the biggest source of news for us today is social media. On platforms like Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, this is where we are consuming news from. But who created or generated the news in the first place? It is conventional media. Conventional media outlets like Hindu, Indian Express, or other electronic TV channels or journalist outlets. Those are the ones creating the news. They are the ones investing in building the journalist network, in maintaining the large staff needed, doing the fact check and reporting the news by maintaining the highest ethical standards. But most of it is being consumed on social media, on new age platforms, and these companies, especially social media firms, have got tremendous control on what news you're going to access or view. They are cornering most of the ad revenue generated through the news articles, which was originally created by conventional media outlets. So around the world, this has become a point of conflict. Conventional media firms are demanding that new age media should share part of the revenue with them because they are the original content creators. How can social media firms corner all the ad revenue when they never created the content? They only created a platform for the content to be shared, but the content is coming still from conventional media, right? So in countries like Australia, there are laws which are passed, which are put in place, which mandates the new age media to share part of the revenue with conventional media. In India as well, this issue is picking up. Media outlets are demanding a big share of the revenue generated by social media firms because conventional media is the one which is creating the news content. This is the first issue highlighted by the Union Minister. Second, Union Minister is expressing concern about the ease with which fake news and misinformation is spreading on new age media. So to tackle this, we have IT rules of 2021 that regulates the social media intermediaries, which we have covered multiple times in our previous classes. The third issue being raised by the Union Minister is about the algorithmic bias of social media platforms. See, social media depends on your engagement. They want your maximum engagement. They want the audience to be constrained and restricted on their platform. They want you to keep viewing reels after reels and shorts after shorts. So to drive maximum engagement, they keep dishing out the best content that you like, right? The algorithms understand your likes and preferences through your interactions, through your activity, and keep suggesting the same kind of content to keep you within that virtual loop. So you keep scrolling through the feed and spend more time on the platform. That is when the engagement drives up, and that's how they can make more revenue by showing more ads to you. But this algorithmic bias of the algorithm on which the social media platform has been built, it could end up promoting more extremist content or fake, inaccurate content. Now, if you show an inclination towards information which is not entirely accurate or a certain type of extremist content, be it right-wing extremism or left-wing extremism, you will keep getting similar content on your feed. The algorithm will keep suggesting similar content, creating this virtual world where you are made to believe that this is the world view and world opinion. This might end up shaping the opinion of millions of people. The algorithmic bias is held directly responsible for indoctrinating several people around the world. This is a critical flaw which the Union Minister has highlighted. And finally, the last point, a very relevant point. With the rise of AI, especially generative AI, What will happen to IP rights? Musicians, artists, right? Through their creative effort and hard work, they are creating original works of art. But today, generative AI tools like ChatGPT is consuming them and creating AI content. And someone else is claiming credit. Someone else is making revenue out of it. So this weakens intellectual property rights. It weakens the copyrights held by the original content creators. So how will they be protected? These are key issues which the world is tackling with. All governments are dealing with. And the Union Minister has highlighted these issues. So please spread more awareness about these issues and also try to think and contemplate on these issues as well. Next, I would like to give you a couple of important updates and then we'll quickly look at the prelim section. JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, one of India's prestigious universities, is planning to upgrade its curriculum to include Indian knowledge systems as part of its curriculum. Traditional Indian knowledge systems to be integrated into modern curriculum, which is taught at JNU. See, the National Education Policy 2020, NEP, it calls all the institutions of higher education to inculcate traditional knowledge systems into modern curriculum as well. It's one of the goals laid down under the National Education Policy. Based on this, the UGC, University Grants Commission, has last year made it mandatory for all the universities in the country to inculcate Indian traditional knowledge systems into modern curriculum which is taught in the universities. For example, when you study political science, generally subjects like this, it is dominated by Western philosophical thought. Any students of political science, you would know the obsession of the academic domain only with Western thinkers, from Plato to Aristotle to Socrates to even Rousseau, Hobbes, etc. But there are several Indian thinkers since ancient times who have made a remarkable contribution to the field, including Kautilya. In fact, that is the reason why I ran a special series on our YouTube channel a few weeks ago called Chanakya Niti. If you haven't seen those episodes, please find the playlist on the homepage of our YouTube channel and watch these 4 videos on Chanakya Niti, where I try to break down Kautilyan thought and apply that into contemporary geopolitics. So there is a lot to learn from Indian thinkers as well, from Indian philosophers. If you look at Vedas, for example, the Vedic thought is relevant for public administration. It is relevant for political science. So there are a lot of benefits that we can derive by looking at traditional Indian knowledge systems and inculcating that into our modern educational framework. There's no harm in studying Western thought and foreign philosophies, but we should also be aware of Indian thought as well. And that is what the new education policy, the National Education Policy of 2020 promotes, and JNU is trying to inculcate that. Similarly, students of botany, they can learn a lot. They can learn a lot from Ayurveda and traditional alternate systems of Indian medicine, right? They can learn from ancient Indian practitioners. Students of psychology can learn from yoga and its impact on the mental health, the mental well-being of an individual. So such aspects of traditional Indian knowledge from ancient medieval India is being incorporated into our modern education framework under the National Education Policy of 2020. Next, another important insight that we can get from an article on page number 4 is about the issue of displacement. See, the article itself is not relevant, but I'm trying to show you a different perspective to newspaper reading. Many of you might skip over this article thinking it's not at all needed for the exam. Yes, a lot of the content here in the article is not relevant, but this article gives us a real example of the issue of displacement caused by land acquisition for large projects, how it displaces people, affects them for decades together. You can use this as an example in essay papers or questions on social issues and social justice, or questions in economy, or questions in internal security. For example, in internal security, we have a chapter on linkages between development and extremism. How the lack of development and issues like displacement caused by land acquisition can create a fertile ground for rise of extremism. So there is one particular example quoted here in this article today. It refers to the JNPT project, the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust project near Mumbai in Maharashtra, which was taken up in 1984. This mega public project led to the displacement of a large number of fishermen and farmers who have been displaced by this project. So this critical project, the JNPT, to create the port infrastructure and the township around it, it resulted in the acquisition of land belonging to fishermen in the traditional coastal villages and also some of the farmers in the Raigad district of Maharashtra. So they were supposed to be rehabilitated. Generally, whenever there is land acquisition for public purposes, those who are displaced, they are rehabilitated, settled in alternate land, given housing facilities and livelihood support from the government so that they can restore normalcy in their lives. But in many cases of such displacement, rehabilitation is not fulfilled. The promises made by the government is not fulfilled and upheld, and that is what has happened with the people of the Raigad region in Maharashtra. Those who were displaced in 1980s, it's been 40 years plus, even today, they are struggling for their basic rights. They were settled in the Sheva Kolivada region, which is today's Navi Mumbai, and the Naveen Sheva region, all located on the far outskirts of Mumbai. But even today, they don't have permanent residency rights. Their property title rights are not recognized. They don't have occupancy certificates. The fishermen and farmers who lost their jobs, they're still struggling with their livelihood because they never got adequate support from the government. And the people have raised this issue with the local district collector. In fact, this could even be given as a case study in your ethics paper. That's why I'm telling you such articles can also become relevant. It all depends on your perspective. Yes, in general, the article is irrelevant. It seems to be not connected with the exam. But if you look at the links, you can definitely use this as an example in various subjects. Until recently, the habitations created here, the temporary townships which were created to settle the people, they didn't even have water and electricity. For 30 years, people have suffered without water and electricity. And just recently, they've started getting water and power connections. They haven't got adequate compensation and they're still fighting for their rights. So that is an example that you can use in your answers, in ethics paper, in essay paper, and across your GS papers. So let me know what you think. Do you think the article was not at all necessary, or do you think it is relevant, as I told you? Now let's quickly look at the prelim section, a quick go through of the small articles. In fact, on page 3, we have an advertisement by the government of Bihar. It's not an article, but it's an ad. It's an ad referring to Valmiki Tiger Reserve, where the government of Bihar is trying to invite more tourists, trying to promote tourism at Valmiki Tiger Reserve. So here I would like to give you a practice question. Please take up the practice question. Which of the following statements is or are correct? There are 3 statements about Valmiki Tiger Reserve. I will not give you the answer right away. This is a small exercise for you. Let me know the answer in the comments. And by tomorrow, I will post the answer with the question on my Telegram channel. Just wait for a few more minutes. I will share the QR code for my Telegram channel. You can join my Telegram channel to get the PDF as well of today's Hindu analysis. And tomorrow I'll post the question with the right answer. But now, let's see how many of you can get this question right. Read the statements carefully about Valmiki National Park and Tiger Reserve and try to get the right answer. Next, on page 9, there is a reference to India-Japan relations. See, in 2015, India-Japan had signed a defense cooperation agreement. It is called India-Japan Defense Cooperation or Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. Under this framework, India-Japan were supposed to help each other in defense technology. Japan was very eager to export defense technology to India. India was even looking at procuring a Japanese aircraft. The Indian Navy was interested in procuring a Japanese aircraft for the naval operations. Now, can you find out which amphibious aircraft was this? But this project has now been cancelled. Indian Navy has dropped the project because of the high cost. We did consider a Japanese amphibious aircraft for the Indian Navy under the India-Japan Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative, but now the project has been dropped because of the higher cost. But can you find out which amphibious aircraft was this and mention that in the comments? Now, what is the news article here? India-Japan have signed their first ever agreement under this Defense Technology Cooperation Framework for building unicorn masts. What is a unicorn mast? Unicorn here in the naval context, in the context of naval warships, stands for Unified Complex Radio Antenna. Now, if you have seen modern naval ships, they look like this. They have a very limited radar signature. They don't have too much of curved surfaces. They limit the radar signature. And at the top, can you see this conical structure? This is nothing but a unicorn mast. It essentially contains the radar and communication antenna. In old naval ships, you might have seen, the naval ships would use to carry these large antennas, which had a curved surface, increasing the surface area, thereby exposing the naval warships to radar detection by the enemy. But today, modern naval warships are stealthy. They are built to evade radar detection as much as possible. And the entire radar and antenna system of the warship is concealed inside one conical system that you see here at the top. This is nothing but the mast of the ship. So a unicorn mast, it unifies the radio, radar, antenna system of the warship, conceals it in a conical structure with very limited radar signature, thus making the warship more stealthier. It makes it less vulnerable for detection by the enemy. Is that clear? So Japan has mastered the technology and it will share this technology with India. India-Japan will co-develop and co-produce the unicorn masts, which will be deployed on Indian naval warships. India's Bharat Electronics Limited will collaborate with its Japanese counterpart. So this is the agreement that was signed at the 2+2 ministerial meeting. India-Japan have a 2+2 dialogue at the ministerial level as well. That is, the foreign and defense ministers of both countries, they meet regularly. But under the 2+2 ministerial dialogue, the concerned officials of defense and foreign ministry of both India-Japan have signed this defense technology agreement as part of India-Japan defense technology cooperation. So please make a note of this. Next, the EUDR is in the news. European Union Deforestation Regulation. The European Union is strongly committed to climate action goals, which includes its fight against deforestation. So EU has brought out very strict guidelines and restrictions on imports. If the imported product had caused deforestation in the home country, the native country. Now, let's say, for example, from India, coffee is being exported to Europe. If the coffee production in India had led to deforestation beyond the permissible limits under the European guidelines, such coffee will not be permitted into the European market. So EUDR is essentially a trade barrier. It's an environment climate linked trade barrier to encourage all the producers to become more sustainable. But however, countries like India oppose such regulations because this could hurt our domestic producers. So after pressure from India and many other countries, the European Union has agreed to postpone the implementation of these deforestation guidelines. It was supposed to come into effect from December 2024. These strict guidelines could have impacted India's coffee and rubber producers in our plantation crops. Because plantation crops generally leads to a lot of deforestation. But however, traditional Indian coffee which is grown especially in Karnataka and parts of Western Ghats, right? It does incorporate a forest structure into the plantation, where large wooded trees are cultivated with the coffee plantation. But still, it does account for deforestation, and especially small farmers could have been impacted. Similarly, rubber producers in India could have been impacted. They may be held to be in violation of the European guidelines on deforestation, and their products would have been banned from the European market. And don't forget, Europe is a massive market for Indian coffee, Indian rubber, etc. So because of pressure and opposition from India and many other countries, the EU has agreed to postpone the implementation. For large producers, it will come into effect from 2025 December. But for small producers, especially from countries like India, the implementation will start from June 2026. So this gives enough time period or enough window for small producers to ensure they match the European standards on deforestation. Next, China's Premier Xi Jinping has addressed the APEC summit. So you should know what is APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It's one of the important and largest multilateral economic groups of the Pacific region. It was established in 1989 and it brings together 21 Pacific Rim countries. It has members like Japan, United States, many Southeast Asian countries, and the rim states of the Pacific region, the littorals of the Pacific. They are members of this group called APEC. It is headquartered in Singapore and plays a key role in promoting free trade and improving economic relations between the Pacific Rim countries. Now, can you find out whether India is a member or observer of APEC? That is my question to you. Is India a member or is India an observer to APEC? What is India's status at the APEC? Please let me know in the comments. Coming to the last article for today, on the supplement page of the Science and Tech edition, there is an article referring to the Oriental pied hornbills, which are native to the Indian subcontinent, found especially in northeast India. Historically, they were found in eastern parts of India as well, and even in Southeast Asia. But today, these majestic birds, the Oriental pied hornbills, are primarily found in northeast India. They are listed as least concern on the IUCN Red List, meaning they are not a threatened species as such. But however, they play a very important role in our forests. They are often referred to as the forest engineers. They're also called the farmers of the forest because they play a key role in distributing the seeds around the forest, and they help in propagation of a diverse variety of plants. That's why they are called as forest engineers or farmers of the forest. Also, if they build a nest in a forest area, it's an indicator of good health of the forest. They have this innate ability, the basic instinct, to identify the health and quality of an ecosystem. So if there are more hornbill nests found, it's a good positive indicator about the health of that forest. So it's seen as an indicator as well, as an eco indicator. Now in Assam, in the Mayong village in Morrigaon district, the community, they worship these hornbills. They consider them as sacred. There is a community belief in the Mayong village of Morrigaon district of Assam that these Oriental pied hornbills will bring peace and prosperity. So as a result, the entire community plays a role in conserving them. They even grow bananas and papayas, etc., so that there is enough fruit available for these birds. They actively prevent the hunting of these birds. They play a role at the community level to conserve and protect the species. So this is a great example of community-driven conservation effort. The community considers these hornbills as sacred, and they believe that these are harbingers of peace and stability and prosperity. So that is what you need to learn. Please note down the name of this village in Assam where the Oriental pied hornbills are worshipped and protected and conserved at the community level. So this concludes my discussion for today. You can join my Telegram channel for the PDF of this session and also to get the answer for the prelims practice question. So scan the QR code and I will share the PDF and as well as the answer. So this brings the session to an end. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session and I hope you have understood all the topics. If you did, please press the like button. Let me know what you think in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.